Hello and welcome to a Wee Dram, a monthly sit-down where we talk about work, life and the bits in between, usually over a metaphorical whisky, although we might try and make it a real one day. Not sure how that will come over. I'm Scott Hamilton.
And I'm Steve O'Donnell.
Hello, Steve. So we've split this today into three parts, and this is basically based on some feedback that we got from friends, family, viewers, listeners to the first Wee Dram. First thing we're going to do is we're going to do a quick run through of some news, the stuff that's shaping how we work, how we live, and how we think right now. And then we're going to go into a proper conversation with Sarah Greasley to talk about fractional life. She talks very honestly and openly about moving into fractional life, what surprised her, what scared her, and what actually matters once the corporate noise fades. And then finally, Steve and I will come back with a few lessons from the bar, things we've learned, often the hard way, about working fractionally in a world where work is, frankly, a bit weird now, as we've talked about quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Okay, so let's start with the news, he says rather slowly. Okay.
Right.
First thing I'm going to talk about is people, okay? And it's I want to start with people, I want to start with work. So according to Reuters, layoffs have continued early into 2026 across sectors including biotech and life sciences, not just technology. Analysts quoted say this reflects longer-term caution rather than a short-term correction as companies hold back investment amid economic and geopolitical uncertainty. How often do we talk about this, Steve? It's significant. It's not just the job losses themselves, it's the signal. Job security is no longer concentrated in any one sector, which helps explain why more people are reassessing how and where they want to work.
That's true. And I think since COVID, how they work is also just as important, isn't it? Is it hybrid? Is it working from home? Is it working in the office? Is it full-time in the office? What's going on?
What's going on? And as I talk about, and we'll come on and listen to Sarah talking about it, I mentioned it there, work is weird. Work is weird now. And I don't think it's just a generational thing anymore when you hit a certain age. I think work and that sort of nature of work and hybrid work is totally different from what it was 10, 20 years ago. Okay, so my second news item, moving on, is around planet. And again, you'll like this, Steve. So nuclear energy re-enters at pace the climate debate. So in energy news, nuclear power is it quietly re-entering the climate conversation, again, according to Reuters and the International Energy Agency. Governments are revisiting nuclear as part of their low carbon transition, driven by energy security concerns and rising electricity demand from, guess what, AI data centers. Investment is increasingly focused on small modular reactors. What a tee up for you, which proponents argue are safer and quicker to deploy, though public unease remains a bit high. Nuclear remains politically awkward, but the data is forcing it back onto the table as countries look for reliable, low-carbon baseload power. Steve, this is your sweet spot.
Well, look, absolutely. And here's the thing. When we look at power, we have to look at a system, not just nuclear is just generation. It generates power, but it generates power highly reliably, and it does it over a protracted period. So you can run one of these SMRs for years with no maintenance. So 24/7, more than 5 nines reliability, because it's designed to work like that. And if you want baseline load, that's brilliant. The big thing that people miss is that the real critical problem with power is not necessarily generation. It's actually the system, which combines the distribution of power, the generation of power, and the storage of power. Short-term storage, which you can do in lithium batteries, and then long-term storage, which you might do in terms of hydrogen or liquid air, which allows you to store winter wind turbine energy and then replay it in the summer when there's much less wind, when it's So there's a whole system thing, and there's no doubt whatsoever that nuclear has a part to play in it. The problem with nuclear is that permitting takes so long. All the regulations about making sure that the reactor is safe, that all the containment is safe, etc. It's really important, and it's not going to happen next week.
Well, listen, I think this is really important because I'm going to move on to my third news point here, okay? Because it's around progress.
Aye.
Yeah, and you're actually a step ahead of me here. So progress, and it plays into this. Innovation races ahead of research, okay? On progress and innovation, Reuters are reporting again that global investment in AI, advanced materials, and life sciences innovation continues to rise, led by governments and large tech. However, researchers warn that while innovation cycles are accelerating, fundamental research still operates on long timelines, often decades, not quarters. So the growing tension is between commercial urgency and scientific reality. Businesses want rapid breakthroughs, while science insists that some progress simply can't be rushed without consequences. To your point, these things, we have the research, we've got the innovation, we've got the ideas, we've got the creativity, we've got geniuses the length and breadth of this country, but it takes time to implement things into action and see the outcomes.
Right, and actually implementation. It's not just proving things in a lab or a test tube. It's actually getting it out in the street and actually being adopted, and people funding that innovation. And we talked about energy a minute ago, highly expensive to roll out a major grid upgrade. And the national grid is doing that. You know, they're rolling out loads and loads of new pylons and power lines and higher voltage systems. London, there's new connectors going across London that operate at twice the voltage that the older systems are working at. And in life sciences, which I'm quite familiar with now, the timeline between having an idea, working out that you want to go after a particular illness, I don't know, like Parkinson's or something like that, to finding a clinical candidate that you can put through clinical research is, 5 years. 5 years of deep research to go and find something. And then after that, you've got to go through permitting, human testing, testing for reactions and all that sort of stuff. So absolutely, the Tomorrow's World thing, if you remember Tomorrow's World.
Oh, I do.
Always talking about stuff. And funnily enough, 10, 15 years later, you'd see these things actually arrive and be real products. And it hasn't changed. Although I must admit that the cycle time has improved, because very often some of the innovations are able to do things faster. So I couldn't agree with you more. Really, really important stuff.
Absolutely. Okay, so Steve, what's on your list of headlines for the month gone by?
Right, so this is real time. I was at the Scots and London board meeting this morning, and Hugh Pym, who's a BBC journalist, is a member of our board, and he got called away because Mr. Jenrick has just been given the bullet from the Tory party because he was plotting to exit and go and leave and join Reform. And this is I think this is a typical thing where politicians are looking to keep the pot boiling, lots of interest going on, embarrass over here, and then keep the discussions going about it. So old Jenrick has got the bullet. He's out.
So that's really funny, because it's not funny at all. But I've been out and about this morning, and it's a terrible thing. You know that way where you hear little clips of news, and just when it's getting to the punchline, you got to get out of the car and do something or go to a meeting, and you come on and like the news has moved on. And it was only about half an hour ago that I just walked in and I caught the BBC headlines there but he's not actually come out and declared what he's doing yet, as if it was terribly obvious.
He apparently, according to Kemi, he was actively engaged in plotting to make the announcement of a move across, and so we'll undoubtedly see this. But I think she's actually taken some of the heat out of the situation by being proactive and dealing with it. So that's interesting. And then,
Absolutely, and before we go into this anymore, we're not setting up a competitive podcast here for Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart on the rest is politics.
it's not just interesting.
It's very interesting.
And anyone who's been following me on LinkedIn might notice that I've been responding a lot to the ridiculous statements that London is a dangerous place to live. And this really annoys me. I've lived in London for decades, and there were times when London was dangerous. If you walk through Brixton at night, you wouldn't expect to be going home, except maybe in a box. But London has improved beyond all measure. And there's been lots of talk about knife crime and so on. Knife crime in London is at the lowest it's ever been. And murder is at the lowest point in 2025 that's ever been recorded. So certainly violent crime is on the decrease. And then secondly, we've seen quite a big uptick on moped thefts of mobile phones. And I got to admit, that is a real pain. One of my refugees who lives with me, she got her phone snatched just outside the house near Tower Bridge. Really, really distressed. Very, very upsetting thing. And the problem with that is that the Met Police failed to deliver regulation and enforcement on these damn little electric bikes that scoot around at 50 miles an hour in a 20 mile an hour zone, going over the pavements. And the criminal element have picked this up, and they've got these high-speed bikes that nobody can chase, and they've taken advantage of it. I note, though, in London, recently walking down Regent Street, that the police were out in force, and they were grabbing every electric bike that was going past and checking it and impounding it on the basis that it had no insurance and it wasn't allowed to be on the road. And that was it. They weren't getting them back.
Interesting.
So, Met Police, well done, right? We're making progress there. So I love that. I thought that was really interesting.
I love that. You're very good. And you've done this a couple of times now, shouting out for our services, because, and I mean that genuinely, we're very good at trashing the service. Oh, the health service doesn't work, the police doesn't work, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. And I know it's frustrating. I know there's been cutbacks. I know at times, but I don't think we shout out enough where the services do work. And well done you for reminding us.
We're doing a bloody good job. Really, really pleased with them. And it's about time that we said as much, because, it's not plod. These guys actually do think about this and think about how to fix things at source. You might have heard stories about people saying, "I had my laptop nicked in the pub, or I had my phone nicked, and I've been able to track it to some tower block in Leytonstone. And I know where the damn thing is. I've called the police, but they won't do anything about it." Well, funnily enough, it's been changed. There's a new act that's gone through Parliament that allows the police, in hot pursuit, it's called, right? That allows the police to enter premises where there are devices that are actively pushing out the fact that they've been stolen. So this is going to change the game, because the problem in London with mobile devices is it's become industrial. These guys were allowed to get onto it, and it's become industrial. They go in containers off to China, they get cleaned up, and then they get sold in the international market. So
listen, I said we wouldn't debate every news item, and now I'm in danger of breaking a promise to myself and getting into a debate here, or a discussion, not a debate, because I do agree with you. But 30 years ago, it was car stereos.
That's right.
Do you know, 30 years ago, nobody talks about 30 years ago. Actually, 30 years ago, it was car stereos. You get your window smashed, your stereo pulled out. 20 years ago, it was sat-nav. I remember my car getting broken into because I'd left my Tom-Tom. Remember those big Tom-Tom units? Other vendors were available that you suckered onto your windscreen, car gets smashed into. And now it's mobile phone. I think the mobile phone feels a bit more personal and immediate because it's somebody grabbing it out of your hand, as opposed to your vehicle when it's not there. But there's always some, disruptive crime that we're constantly trying to address. That we, it's a pain in the arse as much as anything else. Not your phone, not your stereo, not your sat nav.
It's true, and basically, legislation and the police have just got to stay up to date with what the latest crimes are, and then hammer down on them hard. And cleaning up as a pedestrian, and I suppose I'm no youngster anymore. As a pedestrian, I find these high-speed electric bikes utterly dangerous because they're silent and deadly. You're trying to get off the bus, get across a bus lane, and before you know it, this thing is bearing down you at 50 miles an hour with no brakes. And I don't know how more people aren't really injured with them.
Yeah, for sure.
The final thing I wanted to pick up on was the news about Denmark and Sweden and Norway all sending their troops off to Greenland. I thought was very interesting. Basically, just setting the tripwire because we've got the US president looking at expanding the territory of the United States with Canada, Venezuela, and Greenland. And I mean, if we think about this, can you imagine having this conversation a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago? People would say, man, you're smoking something.
Madness.
The United States are our buddies.
Yeah.
And now we've got our armed forces occupying part of the European Union, part of NATO, to protect us from, I don't even know what to call it, but it is imperialism.
Well,
imperialism.
It is, and I think it all adds back to this huge political uncertainty, right? Geopolitical uncertainty, and it impacts works, jobs, enterprise. I mean, the flood. I think people read the headlines and they go, "Oh, Mr. Watsit's a wee bit mad this week. Here's another one. Where is Greenland? They're getting the globe out." But what people don't really understand is the ripple down effect on everything that we do. Energy prices, it'll be prices of groceries, of retail, international trades, tariffs, jobs, what we do, our livelihood. The trickle down. In fact, it's not a trickle down. This is a quite a significant flow down that's hitting prices already. It's hitting the job market already. And actually, as we'll come on and as we play out the VR with the discussion with Sarah, we touch in there about the sustainability agenda and the impact that actions from way out west are causing on what the enterprise and what people are able and willing to do around sustainability, which is not a problem that's going away anytime soon.
Absolutely. Just in another tiny little news article, I read a story this morning, which has kind of been a bit being debunked. But apparently, since most of the Amazon rainforest has been cut down, the trees and other plants in the rainforest have got bigger and are now absorbing more carbon. So that's the playback. It's okay. Keep cutting down the Amazon rainforest. It'll all be okay on the night. It turns out it's not true. So if you read that one, take it with a very, very big pinch of salt.
I think that'll be going up on Substack on somebody's platform, in the not too distant future. Right. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for this. When you said I've got one other headline, I wasn't sure whether you were going to mention Airdrieonians appointing a new manager or my other favourite sporting team, Denver Broncos, getting through to the playoffs in the NFL. And I hate doing this because now that I've mentioned both of them, next month when we're having our next Wee Dram, Denver will probably get booted out in the first round of the playoffs in the NFL, and Airdrie have been kicked out of the cup. So I'm kind of.
I've heard rumours though that they've made space at Hampden Park for the World Cup.
Have you? Breaking news. We need to get a jingle for this. Breaking news. Steve O'Donnell, straight out of the Scottish Business Network this morning. There's a wee rumour we're making space at Hampden for the World Cup. Might like back to Mr. Trump's ancestry. Yeah.
Anyway, if you believe that, you'll believe anything.
Oh, listen, don't spoil it. This is an exclusive. Okay, exactly. So listen, we're going to take a quick break here, a quick musical break, and then we're going to roll the VR for the conversation with Sarah yesterday, and then we'll come back and have a quick chat about some of the lessons learned. So enjoy the next part of this Wee Dram.
See you in a wee bit.
out my battered heart in a suitcase. Sitting here, think these four walls might be mine. For the first time I'm alone, that's an upgrade. Sitting on a squeaky bed, don't know what happens next. Took the first step and the world didn't end. My independence for goodbye, a fair trade. The potential of an empty room on the left, 302. Didn't know back then I would start again so soon. Call these curtains, they don't classify. Too thin to keep a secret or keep out the light. I'll throw them open and watch the world go by.
Hello and welcome to A Wee Dram, a monthly sit-down where we talk about work, life and the bits in between, usually over a metaphorical whiskey. And today we're joined by Sarah Greasley. Say hello, Sarah.
Hello.
So we've talked a lot about fractional life over the months, it's really like stepping out of permanent roles, what surprises people, what works and what nobody tells you up front. Sarah, we had originally lined up to do a longer blueprint discussion, but we realised this was a much better fit as a proper conversation on going fractional. So we've dragged her into our metaphorical pub with us instead. No drinks here, Sarah, unfortunately. So Sarah, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us here. Before we get into the lessons and some questions, why don't you spend a few minutes, give us a bit of background, and then tell us what first nudged you towards going fractional?
Sure. So great to be here. So I've had a very long career in tech, probably over 40 years. I started in IBM in the mainframe era. I think punch cards were still a thing when I started. And yeah, they were, weren't they? Yes. And spent a lot of my career in IBM, architecting, engineering, staying very much on the technical side, but becoming a distinguished engineer in IBM. And then I think I had a little bit of a rush of blood to the head, and I went and joined Direct Line, which is an insurance company, as the group CTO. So basically moved from being a industry supplier into someone who actually had to deliver things and make them work, which was great fun. We did an awful lot of absolutely amazing stuff, moved into cloud, etc. And then I spent 2 years at Amazon Web Services, where I was the technology director for EMEA. So and then I had a moment. I think I got to a point where I was not enjoying the challenges of corporate life, the spreadsheets, the budgets, the processes, and I got to a point where I was like, right, okay, I would really like to follow some of my passions, because I think as you become older, you kind of move, I wouldn't say money becomes less important, but I think your passions become really important. And for me, I wanted to operate with purpose. So I think those purposes for me kind of revolved around three things, right? One was around sustainability, climate change, and actually being in a position to make an impact. Right. One was around equality. I would call it equality and equity. Right. So and whether that's actually helping disadvantaged young people, or whether that's actually helping schools to work out what AI means for their students. Right. The students of today will come into a very AI-enabled world. What does that mean for them? What are the skills that are important to employers in that environment? And at the same time, I'm still fascinated by tech. I think once you're fascinated by tech, you just stay fascinated, don't you? So I've built this career, which is kind of partly working with charities, partly working with startups, and doing a little bit of advisory. So that's and I'm 2 years into that process. I started. I did the Financial Times non-exec diploma. Other courses are available, but I really enjoyed it, and I think one of the things for me was that it helped me to move from being seen as just a technology person to actually someone who had a wide perspective on governance, on risk, and how to operate at a board level.
It's a big change, isn't it, moving from an executive role to a non-executive role? Because particularly as technologists, we're really expected to roll our sleeves up and get stuck in. And if you got operational roles, so in my role when I was global head of operations at BT, highly operations, obviously, because operations is in the title, running an enormous budget with loads of people and a whole load of mission critical systems. And then suddenly you've got to step back, and you can have an opinion and you can share your opinion, but don't mess with the executives. No. It's a really, really bad idea.
Yeah. And I think you're spot on. And I think one of the ways that I describe my role is that I'm here to help executives make better decisions, right? So to ask them the questions. So, have you thought about this, right? How are you going to make IT be seen as a competitive advantage? How are you going to, actually address this particular issue? So my role is to ask provocative questions. But you're right. You come from a role as a technologist where you're really rooted and you understand the problem and you understand the root cause, to actually having to take a real step back and go, I'm here to advise rather than execute. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I think it's a continuum of as you progress in your career. You start off on the tools doing a job. In my case, writing programs in Fortran and COBOL, and I really remember the punch card days, all the way up to running a team of thousands of people, where you've got no chance whatsoever of ever doing anything like that, and you need to be able to delegate, and it's really an extension of that general principle that you take to the board, and I think actually. Maybe I could bring in the idea of techies being on the board. And we're called tech neds. Okay, right. I don't know if you've come across that term before.
Yes.
Okay. And actually, it's true diversity, because there are very few tech neds around, and largely because most people think that techies ought to be kept in a cellar, hosed down every so often to stop the smell becoming objectionable, and thrown pizza every so often. They don't really have an opinion that matters in terms of business. Whilst I consider myself, although I'm male, stale and pale, being the most diverse person on one of my board positions at the Cambridge Building Society. Because I'm really the only one who's not a banker and not a and it means you have completely different conversations.
Yes. And I think it's really interesting, actually. So I think you're spot on. I think there is yes, technology is a core, but actually you need to actually ask those questions. There's a lot of the questions that you ask, actually it doesn't matter whether it's technology or it's estates or it's construction or payments or whatever it is, that, just having that inquiring mindset and that ability to ask not just the first order question, but actually then the second order question is really, really valuable, because it makes people think, makes the executives think, and hopefully make better decisions at the end of it.
Absolutely. And this whole concept of accountability, holding the executive team accountable for the decisions that they make, is really important. And if they know that the board is nobody's fool, they're not going to try and pull the wool over our eyes, because they know that they're going to be asked really difficult questions, and they come prepared.
Yes.
And being accountable is one of the most powerful emotions. Is it an emotion? Maybe not. One of the most powerful drivers for making sure that people do a damn good job. And if you have to explain your decisions and your decision-making process and your options, you make sure that you've done that already, because you're going to be held accountable and questioned about it in public.
Yes, absolutely. I think you're spot on there. And I think it's and actually, and again, so interesting. The other part of being on a board, which I think is something that tech people need to really think about, is actually building relationships, right? One of my I have seen people very who've seen me come in at a board level, right, into a board situation, and they feel threatened because of my you must have seen the same, because you have been a senior executive in a different company, and they see you coming in the board, they're going, whoa, this person's going to unpick something, or they're going to, so one of the things I think is really important is establishing that trust with the with the executives. Actually, doesn't matter whether it's the CIO or not, but at the executive level, so that and that's an EQ thing, which again, some techies have to work at, right? But I think it's a really important part of becoming an effective NED as well, or even effective, advisory.
So can I? So that's really interesting. Can I take you back a little bit, Sarah? So you said that, like, when in your intro you talked about the freedom, and removing those shackles and spreadsheets. That sounds like an old Oasis song, doesn't it? Shackles and spreadsheets. You haven't mentioned fear at all. Was there any fear going through your mind? Because if I go back to 2 years ago, when I kind of moved out of large corporate, I was like, yeah, I want the freedom. And then I was like a little bit, oh my God, like that moment of fear and how you cope with it. And then as a second question, like you talked about what you did in the FT course and stuff like that. Steve and I talk a lot about learnings, and I think the fear and the learnings thing came together in a maelstrom for me, which was like, oh, I'm really scared. I have to learn how to do this. And whether that was holding me back for a period or not. Do you want to talk a little about any fears that you had and then how you moved?
And I think that's really good point, Scott, because you go from having so two things. You go from having like people desperately clamoring for your attention, right, to no one's clamoring for your attention, right? And you also go from having a support squad to having no one, right? Because you and I use that in both the official term, i.e., your PA, but also the unofficial term, because if you've built a network of friends in an organization, or a network of colleagues that you can rely on, it's just, that's your support squad as well, right? So you go from that and you have nothing, right? And so I think I did two things. One is that I found a network, right, of people from there's a network of people from the insurance, ex-C-suite from the insurance industry, right? And I joined them, and that started to give me some structure, because it gave me people I could talk to, and meetups and things like that. So I started. So that was one side of it, and the other side of it was that actually I came out of the FT course with a really strong group of us who worked together and worked very well together. So I built a network quite quickly. So that was the first thing, right? I think in terms of I also had a couple of really good mentors, right? And I think that was really helpful, because you don't know where to start, right? You really don't know where to start, and they were really helpful in terms of giving me guidance and introducing me to people and things like that. So that was, so I had a couple of really good people who were really helpful. And that was, because I think if I'd been left completely to my own devices, you'd kind of sit there for a couple of months and you go, well, maybe I should apply for a job or something. I don't know. But, because I certainly didn't feel ready to retire. Right. But and I hate the R words. My children know exactly how to wind me up by using that word. So I hate the R word, but so I wasn't ready to stop working, but I had enough of corporate life. Right. So, and the two are different. So did I feel fear? So I think the course helped me to bridge that, because it also gave me all the learnings, right? So I was learning. So I had a 3-hour exam. I hadn't done a 3-hour exam since I left university, right? And the idea of having to study for a 3-hour exam on the UK Code of Conduct for non-executive directors, right? Brilliant. I mean, it really focused the mind. It made me think. It made me do stuff, and it was fantastic. So I think all of that, I was lucky. That course gave me that springboard. So I got the learning, and it took some of the fear away. I think if I look now, I'm 2 years now since I started this journey. And you start out and you go, every time someone says to you, would you like to do this? You go, yes. And now I've got to the point of going, I need to take a step back, think about what I really want to do and what's really important to me. And sometimes you don't know that to start with. So anyway, yeah.
I Steve and I were talking about this last week, I think, where you kind of have this assumption that I'll take on this Ned role or this fractional role, and it's like 1 day a month. Now, and Steve's shaking his head here for those who may be listening on Spotify or other vehicles. It's never 1 day a month, is it? It's like, and I think I said to you rather flippantly, Steve, it takes half a day to read that 10-page, monthly report, and you said it's more like 100 pages, or in fact, I think Sarah, you mentioned it, 500 pages, yeah. So, and I think there is a bit of as you become established, learning when to say no. You're probably super enthusiastic to say yes because you want to build up the portfolio of fractions, but then it comes to a point where you think, actually, this is impacting, and I want to come back and talk about some of the pro bono stuff and the charity stuff as well, because that for a lot of us is a point of going fractional. You want to create time to do that kind of real give back thing. So it's that ability to say no that becomes really important as well.
Yeah, it is. Yes, spot on, because you're right. Every role that I've taken on has been more than was specified in the in the role description, right? And actually, interestingly, the smaller the charity, quite often, the more the more there is, right? Because you can see more, particularly with the charity, more places where you can make a difference and you can support and you can help make things happen. So
can I ask you a question about sustainability, because it's one of my big things at the moment, and again it's an ongoing theme in the third half. How has going fractional changed the way you think about sustainability in your work and in yourself? Because I don't want to lead the witness here, but when I was in large corporate and we talked about sustainability, it was you had to kind of adopt a sustainability story or positioning from the large corporate you were working for, and you could push back a little bit and yada yada yada. For me now, it's intrinsic. It's like everybody that I deal with, I want to make sure that they're on the agenda. And again, Steve and I talk a lot about the future of fuel and energy and everything else. But for you, how has it geared you? How has it motivated you to kind of take that discussion to another level?
So really interesting. So let me give you a couple of examples, right? One is that I left the corporate world just as AI was taking off, right? I think I'm so one of the areas that I'm very concerned about is the impact of AI on sustainability, right? Because actually, I would love to tell everyone who makes videos of cats on surfboards. Do not do this, right? Or pay for it, or because it costs money, right? It costs energy, it costs resources, it costs water, right? So one of the initiatives, I'm going to call it initiative because it's not a company per se, but it's an initiative. It's called Frugal AI, right? And it's a group of like-minded people who are thinking about how do we help people to use AI more frugally, right? Whether that's smaller models, whether that's some of the startups who are really looking at how they make data centers greener, right? So I'm quite involved in that because I think that's something that's really important, because everyone's particularly everyone's going, I want bigger and bigger models, and that's just more and more compute, right? So I think it's inspired me from that point of view to get involved in that. And the other thing is that one of my portfolio roles is as a trustee at Kew Gardens, which is the Royal Botanical Gardens at Kew, and it's one of the most amazing places on this earth because it has a real remit to it. It's a plant library, it's a scientific research place. It has plants. It's been there for 200 years. It has the Millennium Seed Bank, which is a seed bank, over 1.3 billion seeds from around the world. It is, it's just an amazing place. So I am and I feel very privileged to be part of Kew. Right.
Okay, so that was really interesting, Sarah. One of the things that I think that you spoke about there was using the FT course as a means of expanding and your skills. But I think actually there's a major part that you didn't really talk about, which is your life experience in your executive roles, because I've certainly found that that's been really important for me too. And that life experience, as you become more experienced, and you've made more and more mistakes, because that's the way always, right? You've made more and more mistakes. You work out how to do things. You work out how to talk to people. You work out how to discover things that you don't know about, and you discover how to track down things that shouldn't be happening that are happening. So that experience is really critical. And I think as engineers, we may be familiar with the concept of the Renaissance engineer, which is an engineer who's got skills in multiple different areas.
Yes.
And I think that if you are a pure engineer, board life's probably not for you.
Yeah.
You actually need to have multiple skills, like Leonardo da Vinci. You need to be able to do a bit of marketing, a bit of business model, a bit of budgeting and finance, and the technical skills, and bring all together. Because the critical thing for a board director has been able to join these things up and see opportunities.
Yes.
And I spoke a little bit about business model. Most bankers and accountants don't really get business models. They're terribly operational, actually. And that entrepreneurial thing is often missing from some kinds of boards. And I think if you're on a board, it's important to recognize what kind of board it is. And is it, I'm going to use an analogy here, is it a special forces board, which is all about winning territory, killing off, gaining a feat, and building that business at speed and taking quite significant risks? Is it an army board where you're still grabbing territory, but you've got stuff that you need to defend as well? Or are you a police board? And the police board is you own the market, and what you're trying to do is stop stealing it. And having that kind of attitude about what kind of board you want then helps you to work out how you should be, what skills are really important. And so I work in all three. And I think probably the approach is the police. Because what very often large enterprises fail to recognize is that somebody's stolen their cheese.
Yeah.
Well, they own all this territory, but actually becoming irrelevant. And there's somebody else in the background who's hollowing out their business model.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I talk about two things. I talk about knowledge versus wisdom. Right. Because, I think that is exactly what you're talking about, right? We have wisdom because we've got the scars on our backs, right?
Or on the front, something.
Sometimes on the front, okay, that's fair. I think, and interestingly, I was talking to someone about this the other day. Technology is I would describe it as a horizontal slice across a business as opposed to a silo, right? So I have, as someone who, was a CTO, and I know you're a CIO, so same would apply to you. You had a view across the whole organization, right? Sometimes it felt like you were one of the only people that had that view, in a siloed organization. But that enterprise view is really important, right? And also strategic, again, as a technology, is that you always had this strategic thinking as well, because you had to have a longer term view. And of course, we expect boards to have a longer term view. So I think you're spot on there. And the other comment I would make is we talk about war versus peacetime, which is kind of your police versus special forces. Same analogy.
I think what I've found, and just to use a slightly different analogy, is that because we've talked about different boards here and the board, the fractional life is not necessarily all made up of board roles or NED roles.
No.
And if I use a sport analogy, you can either be on the pitch, or you can be on the touchline, or you can be up in the boardroom and the terraces. So I've kind of found I'm doing a bit of all three, depending on the organisation I work on. I mean, some people are really, and maybe this is where those kind of interim proper fractionals, can you come in and do this for a few weeks, a month, couple of months, whatever it is. You're on the pitch, you're a player. And then it's if I'm on the touchline, I'm managing, and in the boardroom, it's perhaps more advisory and more leading from there as well. So I think for listeners and audience, when they're going into this fractional thing, just think about where you want to be, and I think there's some goodness. There's some goodness in the experience for me of when you're up the terrace and you can see on the pitch, and when you're on the pitch, you can still turn around and look up on up into the boardroom, and that's part of that learning and richness that I think we can still evolve.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. So I think you're spot on, Steve and Scott, because I do, I mentor startups, right? So it's and the experience you get from doing that versus working on large boards is very different. But it's and actually you benefit from having those different experiences going on at the same time.
100%.
Yeah, and actually having a mix is really important. And I imagine a lot of people who are listening to this are thinking to themselves, "This sounds really exciting. How do I get started?" And it might be worthwhile just salting the conversation a little bit about that, because there's multiple different kinds of boards. There's an advisory board, and then there's the fiduciary board, where you go to jail if you screw it up. And very often on advisory boards, you don't get paid, but you might end up, if you're lucky, as I have been in my career, you might end up with some options. So, the business develops, you have an IPO, you have a trade sale.
That's sweat.
And you've done a bit of sweat equity, and you make a bit of cash out of it, which is wonderful. But these advisory boards are really wonderful. Generally, people don't want you on an advisory board to roll your sleeves up and write code or something like that. No. But what they want is your contacts. Your don't do it this way knowledge that because I did it that way 5 years ago and I got burned, or I've got this problem and I can't see an end to it, and you give them the light at the end of the tunnel and say, well, why don't you try this? And I think particularly this is really important for techie people, potential tech neds. And it's to the point you were making earlier, Sarah, because techies and engineers and CTOs and CIOs look across the entire business and they're constantly faced with business executives who say, this is how the business works and it's all changing. Somebody's stealing my cheese. We have to look at that, and we're constantly problem solving across multiple domains. That is such an incredible skill.
Yeah.
And that is really what people want from advisory board members and from fiduciary board members.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And so many organisations I see struggle because they can't prioritise across different things. So the ability to prioritise is part of that skill as well.
Yeah, and I think quite often mature executives sometimes de-emphasize the importance of technology as an enabling force to help them to be agile and flexible in the business models. So they think that sometimes technology is just a cost. So this is the finance view of technology, right? It's just the cost. Let's cut the costs. Let's outsource it all. And then you end up locked into a position where you can't change. Or what are those critical things, the business technologies, the platforms, the invest category stuff? What are those things that we really need to enhance? Because otherwise, when somebody does steal our cheese, we can't die fast enough to actually respond to it.
Yeah, I think, totally agree. And the other thing is that, I've always said that technology tends to align to the organizational, right? So, if your organization hasn't changed for many years, right, your technology is almost definitely stuck in the silos as well, right? And then it does really become a cost because it is not at that point necessarily an advantage. So I agree.
I talk about something that's really aligned with that, Sarah, and that is that you categorize your systems into invest. That's the thing that really kills the competition and drives your profit, drives customer engagement. Then you operate the stuff that you just have to have, the telephone system, the document management system, your email, and then you've got your legacy, which I would actually call it contain, because that's the attitude that you have about it. You don't really want to have it really old, but the costs of changing it are so great that you basically Chernobylize it. You put concrete over the top and try not to change it. But at some stage, you get to the point where you actually have to kill it off. You have to get the gun and shoot it in the back of the head. And managing that balance is something that boards don't really do. They constantly want to push off investing in the technology because they think, oh, well, we can do that next year, and it never happens.
Yes.
And got a stale business that just cannot execute change.
And I think when you decide to kill something, you have to be ruthless, right? Because it's never easy, right? But the other thing I would add to that, right, is actually AI and what's happening with AI and what we're seeing happen with AI, right? And this is it's coming bottom up, right? So if the boards do not understand it and are not engaging with it, it will come up and it will cause challenges in a number of different ways.
That's right.
So,
and then, if you're sorry, Scott, if you're a regulated entity,
yes,
and that's and there are lots of regulated industries like in life sciences and finance, in government, where you basically have to evidence as a director that you're obeying the rules and you're following regulations. And the problem with AI, agentic AI, is that you're making decisions and you don't understand what's in the black box. And you cannot evidence how a decision arrived at. Yet the regulations say you must be to evidence what the decision is and why it was made that way and what the policy was that was applied, what the laws that are applied, and what data points the decisions were made on. And and I think we're getting into, with AI, the same data problem that we've always had. If you've got rubbish data, you end up with rubbish decisions. And if you're not able to track your data and the source of that data, what's the I'm trying to think of the word. How you get to where it is where you made that decision.
Lineage.
You're messed up. And so we've seen the EU have, in typical EU fashion, the EU AI Act, which is really fundamentally, you'll do it this way. And I think it's actually probably a bit anti-competitive. It's going to make it difficult for us to compete against China and the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I see that the current government is looking at this and saying, well, you know what? We're not going to have an overall AI Act. But what we're going to do is we're going to integrate AI requirements into the existing regulations. And to my mind, that's absolutely the right way to go about it. So that drifted off the conversation.
I'm going to bring us all back to this fractional life. Steve, can you go to the bar and get us another dram here for the three of us? And get off your soapbox. So Sarah, listen, I want to wind it up here, but I do want to take you back and just finish off with a final question about something you talked about up front about schools and kids and kind of weave that AI thing as well. Because I think this is super important. And I listened into a podcast yesterday called Work is Weird Now, and Ollie Pickup, the journalist, was on it, and he was brilliant, and we were talking about the impact on learning and everything. And my question is, but let's accept work is weird now, and we'll get more weird. And fractional life is really part of that shift, especially with AI really changing the rules. So thinking about schools and how we prepare children for work, what is your experience of the last couple of years in working fractionally really tell you what matters in the world where careers don't look linear anymore?
So I think what matters in the world, right? And I think this matters whether you are a school child or whether you're in your fractional, your third half, right? Is I think curiosity, right? I think learning, a continual learning mindset, right? I think, and I think the other thing is kind of pragmatism and wisdom, right? And it's kind of curiosity, but it's questioning, right? It's a bit like, if AI says this, right? We should look at it and go, does that look correct? Is it correct? Right? Does it sniff? Does it smell right? Right? And people don't often do that, and they should do that. They should always do that. So I think those are key skills, right? And I think that's regardless, right? What else would I say? And I think the other thing is that actually, particularly when you go fractional, I think network's really important, continues to be really important. So, I still go to, I still do some, kind of CTO type kind of panels and things like that. I support London tech leaders. I still maintain my network because I think that's really important as well. And maintain and grow that network.
Brilliant. Sarah, listen, thank you very much. This has been, it's been everything that I hoped it would be. It's been honest, thoughtful, genuinely really useful, great dialogue. Really appreciate you sharing this with me and Steve and the audience. Thank you so much. And Steve, thank you for you as well for coming and having another wee dram with me.
Aye, absolutely.
And,
can I just say, I got some Aukentoken for Christmas whiskey. There you go. I've got my own.
you want a wee drop of burn water in it just to lift the flavour. Okay. Don't drink it neat.
There you go. Okay.
And as we say, Slanjava.
Aye.
That's been a Wee Dram. Thank you for spending a bit of time with us at the bar. See you next month.
The potential of an empty room on the left, 302. Didn't know back then I would start again so soon. Start again, ooh, again, ooh, again, ooh, again. I'll start again, ooh, again, ooh, again.
Steve, welcome back.
Aye. That went well.
It did go well. It did go well.
Did you like the Hampden Park story?
I did. We're still recording, by the way. So, I did like the hand part. So, welcome back. So, Steve, we recorded that discussion with Sarah
Yes.
24 hours ago, and we've had a bit of time to reflect on it. I thought it was super, super interesting at a number of levels. You know, and I've known Sarah for 25 years. We knew each other back in the IBM days, and I've kind of followed her, but to be honest, I haven't kept in touch with her. But it's a lot of learning. And what was really interesting, just because she's fresh to it. I mean, as you keep telling me, you're a 175-year vet of being fractional, or was it 175, or was it just 45?
No, that's the Cambridge Building Society. It's 175 years old.
Oh, it's not you. You weren't there at the outset.
It could be, you know, because I've been around that long, and it feels that way, honestly.
So if I just hand over to you for a minute, and let's just pick up one or two key points from the discussion with Sarah yesterday, and play them out a little bit here for the audience.
Yeah, let's pick through them. So one of them was, you know, how do you get in? And then the second one was about, now you're in and you've got imposter syndrome. You're thinking, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't really fully understand what's going on in the board meeting and what my role is, what is expected of me. So I think those are two key things. And then we also covered the huge difference between being an executive and having your hands on things, and, you know, being accountable for delivering something, and actually being a challenger and someone who manages governance and ensures that things are being done properly and that they're transparent. And in regulated industries, that's critically important. So let's go way back to the beginning then and say, you know, how do you get in? And I think what came out of it was it's incremental.
Mm.
You don't just go from zero to hero and, you know, you say, oh, I'm going to be a non-exec, and then next week you're a non-exec. It genuinely doesn't happen like that. You actually have to think about it. You have to prepare for it.
Yeah.
Folks that are recruiting non-execs are actively looking for people who are committed to being a non-exec. So doing a full-time executive role, although it sometimes works, doing a full-time executive role and a non-exec role at the same time tends to be somewhat challenging, although not insurmountable. And so I found when I decided to go serious and go after non-exec roles, I started promoting myself as a real fractional exec, not looking for a full-time role, looking for fractional roles, and that makes a huge difference.
It does. And I want to pause there a minute, because I thought we had a really interesting conversation towards the end, which was you did your, I don't know what this says about us, by the way, but you did your forces analogy, and then I turned it into a sporting one, because I think that we should define what we mean by this fractional life, because you instinctively talk about non-exec positions, so a portfolio of non-execs, you know, and you've just done it there again, and I understand why you do that. But fractional to me, and I think when you start out, it still is that kind of hybrid portfolio of stuff. I still see that as, that's kind of my definition of fractional. So you can be, as I said yesterday, or in the discussion with Sarah, you can be on the pitch and on the touchline or in the boardroom, as a sport analogy. You can be a kind of fractional sales exec, difficult, never like it, don't like the hired gun thing, but you can certainly be a fractional sales manager. You can be none of those are non-exec. I suppose
No, they're not.
technically they are,
You
but
can be a fractional CFO. That's really common.
absolutely.
You can be a fractional head of HR.
Yeah,
that's very common too.
So I guess I want to make it just easy for people, because I want people to learn and pick stuff up from this, which is, as you go into this, let's change the naming a little bit, into this portfolio world. It's that, be prepared, and you've been very, very clear in this and very good in this over the last couple of months with me, that there are different things that you will need to do. You might you might be photocopying, you might be polishing your shoes, you might be at the top table, you might not be at the top table. It doesn't really matter. They're all part of that kind of rich tapestry. And I think one thing that you picked up yesterday and Sarah built it out was the learnings you get from those different roles feed. It becomes kind of quite circular in its nature, doesn't it?
I called it the Renaissance effect.
Yes.
Where you've got skills across multiple different silos of knowledge. And most innovations, most things that really make a difference are caused when 2 or 3 things change at the same time. And it might be needs and availability of science or technology that come together, and suddenly there's a market, there's an opportunity. And if you are doing this fractional role and you've got deep experience across multiple silos, you can add so much more, because you can expand the conversation away from this, blinkered view of that's the way we've always done it. We've got to carry on doing it like this, to here's a different way of looking at it. Here's a different way of understanding how to deal with this challenge.
Yeah, for sure. And so my first point, and then we maybe do one or two others just to finish it off. But she mentioned networking.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and just to your point, and maybe this is where we bottom out here in this discussion today, is how'd you get started? Because Sarah's quite a new fractional, as am I. How'd you get started? The network is so important, right? To find roles, because if you apply for a fractional role or a part-time role or a NED role or whatever on LinkedIn, I mean, they tend to be gone before they're even up on LinkedIn, and there'll be thousands of people. So your network, finding your first job through your network, and then just to build that, the second thing that we talked about was, don't stop maintaining your network when you start doing the work and when you start doing the fractional work. So Sarah talked about her work at Q, she talked about charity work, she talked about work in schools. She's doing an awful lot of stuff in there which will maintain and build her network, because you never know where your next gig is coming from in this fractional world. So super important network to get established, but always maintain your network and continue to grow your network to get your next gig.
That's right. And there's also quite a bit of pro bono involved in this, because when you start doing fractional, it's really not like doing full-time, because when you're doing full-time, you don't do that much pro bono. But as a fractional person, you're regularly called in by startups, and they say, oh my God, I don't know how to raise money. My business plan doesn't make sense. The messaging I've got isn't resonating. Can you run a slide rule over this and help me out? And you do. And sometimes nothing comes of it. And other times you find that they say, well, would you like to make this a bit more formal and join the advisory board? And we can't afford to pay you, but here's some options. So some stock options that you could maybe leverage later on. And for me, I've done a lot of that. And a really good example is a buddy of mine asked me to have a look at his cybersecurity business. I made a couple of recommendations, which were to change it from a hardware business into a software business. And he did that. And now it goes live on NASDAQ in 2026. And I'm on the board. So the first bit was free. It was pro bono. And then the advisory board, and then on the main fiduciary board. So it's incremental. And I reckon I'll do quite well out of that. It's a good business.
Mm.
That's not the only one. So, and then often, if you're involved in genuine charity where you're never going to get paid, there are often other non-execs who are involved as well, people who are doing that kind of role. They know you, they see how you behave and how you react and how you think. And before you know it, you're on the short list to be selected for another formal paid job. You absolutely have to network. And I think you have to brand yourself properly as being someone who's in that portfolio career, that fractional career, and are willing to go around and do stuff.
Yeah, 100%. And I get loads of people calling me up now, want to talk to me about the earnings thing, and I'm kind of, I think the expectation that you're going to earn as much at the outset as what you did when you left large corporate. And first point, forget it. Like the dynamics are very different, but you can probably over a period of time do it, but it's certainly not linear.
No.
Get your kind of fixed salary, even as a bonus, role. It's still relatively linear. That you're not going to get. It's going to be very, very lumpy and very, very barren, perhaps for the first 6-12 months.
That's true. So, I mean, as an executive, working at C-level in a reasonable sized business, you'll make 3, 4, 5, 6 more thousand a year, and making that up, doing a bunch of fractional roles is challenging.
Yeah.
But if like me, you mix the enterprise stuff, which generally in a non-exec space pays relatively modestly, with a few really entrepreneurial things where there's an opportunity to get a nice kickback when you have a trade sale or an IPO.
Yeah.
That adds into it. And actually, I don't think I do it all for the money anymore anyway. I think it's much more, I want to keep my brain working. I'm really interested. I've got all this experience and it's such a waste to not use it.
Yeah. And Sarah said exactly that, actually, and, good for her. And the final point I just want to touch on, because I think, again, just thinking about people, who are considering this fractional life, portfolio life, whatever you want to call it, is this point about fear.
Yeah.
And Sarah talked about this, and we asked her a little bit about fear, and she came back and she was pretty strong on this, and she talked about her learnings and the structure, as opposed to it being bravado, as opposed to it being, I've been very successful in the past, of course I'm going to be able to do this. And I think about this a lot in the coaching stuff that I do as part of my portfolio, that because you were good at something here, it doesn't mean you're going to be a good coach. The skills that you need are totally different. And so learning and structure are part of it, but bravado isn't. And she actually said if she'd been left to her own devices, she could have sat there for a couple of months thinking maybe she'd apply for a job. But doing the learning and doing the course helped bridge her fear. It gave her a bit of structure to work through that.
Let's just remind people, Sarah was talking about doing the FT
absolutely
education piece, which is about teaching you how to be a non-executive director and what your legislative and regulatory obligations are to be a director. Really, really useful. But I mean, the other point that came out in the conversation, Scott, was that if you've had an incremental career where you've moved through from being on the tools all the way up to running a big shop with loads of money and loads of people, you naturally move away from being hands-on and actually doing real work to being much more strategic and much more directive and helping people to, coaching and helping people to get on. And as a non-exec, you're constantly working with the executives and, questioning them, helping them, mentoring them, guiding them. So it's a bit of a natural progression, but it's still a big change. And the other thing is that the sign of a good chairman or a good chairwoman, good chairperson, is that they see new non-execs coming on board, they take them under their wing, and they gently guide them through what's expected of them. in exactly the same way as if you bring a new person into your executive team, you do the same thing. You make sure that they know what the culture is, what's acceptable, not acceptable, and what is expected of them. And those three things really help you to understand where you fit. And my dad said to me years and years ago, well, son, no one expects you to do magic. And what he meant by that was that don't set your own self-ambitions so high that they're unachievable. Recognize that you can only do as good as you can do and be satisfied with that. Don't stop being ambitious, right? But don't feel bad because you weren't playing like Pele in the sort of primary 5 school team, right? So you've actually got to set your expectations right and celebrate the fact that you're improving. And I think it's so important, and I think it helps to address the imposter syndrome that some folks feel as they move into a new role.
Yeah,
and
don't expect magic from the outset. Spot on. Without
being sexist, because I actually don't feel I am, but many women feel that way. I think it's because of the cultural structure of our society. Many women feel that way, and I think, in particular, and I think this is quite well recorded, men lean into things and expect, I'll manage to muddle through and I'll all be okay. And women worry about, am I being good enough? Well, the answer, ladies, is you are being good enough. I've never seen a woman not be good enough. So just, get on with it.
And Sarah was absolute testament to that. And I think on a message from your dad, Steve, that's a great place for us to bring this wee dram to a close.
Aye.
Slange of out of your da.
Okay.
Nobody will understand that when I say slange of out of your da. So listen, we've talked about the news, we've talked about fractional life, we've talked as ever about what really changes when certainty disappears. Thanks to Sarah for her honesty and the clarity and the lived experience. If there's a thread running through this, I think it's definitely work is weird now. But it doesn't mean it has to be empty, rushed, or disconnected from who we are. So thanks for spending a bit of time with me and Steve at the bar. We'll see you next month.
See you, team. Bye-bye.
My best friend forever moved to 404. When she needs a light, she'll knock upon my door, and we will drink tequila spilled out on the floor. The potential of an empty room on the left, 302. Didn't know back then I would start again so soon. Start again, ooh, again, ooh, again, ooh, again. I'll start again, ooh, again, ooh, again. Start again.